In last week's lesson, we made a start on verse number 21 of Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas u'budu rabbakum. That all people worship your Lord. And I mentioned last week that the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word an-nas here and not the word, say, like alladhina amanu, is to indicate that the order of worshipping is not restricted to just Muslims here. But here the word an-nas is indicating to those three groups of people, or those three types of people which we discussed in Ruku 1 and 2. And those three types of people were, number one, the God-fearing people. So hence the meaning of this verse will be, Ya ayyuhan nas, that O God-fearing people, u'budu rabbakum, continue worshipping your Lord. And also this word an-nas is indicating towards the disbelievers who were mentioned before, that O disbelievers, give up your idols, give up your Lat and your Uzza and all these other idols, and u'budu rabbakum, and worship your Lord. And an-nas could also indicate towards the hypocrites, towards the munafiqs who were mentioned before, that O hypocrites, O munafiqs, give up your hypocrisy, give up your trickery, give up your two-facedness, and u'budu rabbakum, and worship your Lord. And then we went on to look at the word u'budu rabbakum and the term ibadat. That what is meant by ibadat and what is meant by worship. And I mentioned quite clearly last week that ibadat isn't just restricted to your namaz and your fasting. That's what we normally think or assume, that when we say or worship Allah or worship your Lord, the first thing which comes to our mind will be that read your namaz, give zakat, go for hajj, fast and so on. That is ibadat. But again, or I mentioned last week that ibadat is a very comprehensive word, and it means, the word ibadat basically means to totally or to ultimately obey and the total submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that 100% totally obey the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time to submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for example, like the legislations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then to obey and act on each one of them, and at the same time to submit yourself. And remember, submitting is not to ask any questions, why do we have to do this, or what is the reason and what is the hikmah behind that, but to totally submit yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and at the same time to obey on every single legislation and command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the true meaning of ibadah. And keeping that in mind, when we look at it, there's many other things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us or has ordered us to do besides reading our namazis, besides fasting, besides giving zakat, besides going for hajj. Things such as being kind to your parents. That is also a form of ibadah. For example, like being kind to animals and so on. So that is also a form of ibadah. Being kind to the needy and the poor and to the orphans and so on, that is also a form of ibadah. Amr bil ma'ruf, nahy anil munkar, bidding the fair and forbidding the unfair, that is also a form of ibadah. So here, the word u'budu rabbakum means that worship your Lord is just not restricted to your namaz, but at the same time it means that worship your Lord in such a way where, for example, you are not, like you do other things besides like your namazis, but what you do is that it's like a complete way of life. Like for example, everything which you do should be according to the teachings of Islam. And then the final point I mentioned with regards to ibadah was that even earning a halal livelihood, even earning and working and earning a halal livelihood, that is also a form of ibadah. And then we went on to mention some particular jobs which Muslims do, and whether it is permissible for Muslims to work in such environments or not. And then the first masla we looked at was that whether it's permissible for Muslims to work in banks. And I mentioned in quite detail last week that if you're working as a cashier in a bank or as a manager in a bank, then obviously it would not be permissible. Why? Because there are basically two conditions which you need to keep in mind for a particular job or for a particular work to be considered lawful or halal or not. The first condition is that the nature of the job you're doing, that what you're doing, that has to be halal, that has to be lawful. If you're doing something which is haram, like for example, you're doing some interest transactions, you're selling alcohol, I don't know, you're doing some other kind of things, then obviously because the nature of the job isn't halal, so therefore that job won't be halal, won't be permissible. And the second condition is that the wages you're receiving, the income you're receiving, that has to be from halal and lawful sources. And I said that keeping those two conditions in mind, and remember those two conditions have to be found, both of them have to be found for that job to be lawful. If you have a situation where the nature of the job may be lawful, but if the person is giving you haram money somehow, or he's kind of, the wages you're getting is somehow haram. Obviously, we're not going to go into detail now, but just say the wages you're giving is somehow haram, then obviously that job won't be haram, that won't be permissible and lawful for you to take. So both of these conditions need to be found. And as we're keeping that in mind, we looked at, working as a cashier in a bank won't be permissible. Why? Because you are actually witnessing interest transactions, you are writing down, recording interest transactions, hence it would not be permissible. However, to work, say, like for example, as a guard in a bank, or to work as a cook in a bank, or as a cleaner in a bank, then that would be allowed, that would be permissible. Why? Because the nature of the job you're doing, that is first and foremost, that is permissible, because being a cleaner, working as a guard, there's nothing wrong with it, there's nothing unlawful regarding it. And with regards to the second condition, that the wages has to be lawful. So the money in the bank, not all the money in the bank is actually haram. It's only a certain percentage is haram. So only a certain percentage is interest. The majority of the money is actually money deposited by the depositors, and also capital from the owners and the managers of the bank. And then you've got interest money, which in comparison to the other two is very, very minimum and very, very less. So therefore, if a person happens to be a cleaner for a bank, then obviously, such a job will be permissible. Why? Because the nature of the job is halal, and number two, that the wages he's receiving, the majority of it is permissible, hence it will be permissible for him to work in such an environment. Now, what I'm going to do for the next few minutes or so is just to look at some other kind of jobs which, just to clarify that whether it is permissible or not. The second masla, or the next situation we're going to look at, is to work in the insurance environment, or to work in the insurance company. That whether it is permissible for Muslims to work in such field. Now, the ruling is that, again, insurance, I'm not going to mention it now, but I'll mention it later on when we look at the verses regarding gambling. Insurance, very briefly, is something which is haram and unlawful. All forms of insurances, whether they are car insurance, whether they are home or life insurance and so on, all forms of them are haram. And the reason why is that when you analyze the insurance contract or the contents of that insurance, you will realize that there's a form of interest involved, there is a form of deception involved, and more importantly, there is an element of qimar and gambling. There's always chancing involved, that if I have an accident, then you will get paid X amount of money. Or if my house is burgled or robbed, then you'll get this much amount of money, and so on and so forth. So when we analyze the insurance conduct, we can determine and deduce that insurance is something which is not allowed in Islam. With regards to car insurances, motor insurances, because it is a law of the country, then it is permissible. Permissible not because that insurance is permissible, more because of az-durura. Durura means because of necessity, then that particular job, that particular thing becomes permissible. Now, the issue we're going to look at is that whether it is permissible to work in the insurance field. The ruling is that no, it will not be permissible, because like in working in a bank, whilst if you are working in the insurance environment, then you are also seeing people, or you are also witnessing interest transactions. You are also witnessing, you may be recording interest transactions and so on. So because of all these factors, okay, it would not be permissible for you to work in that particular environment. And obviously, more importantly, if, for example, if you are working in the insurance company or in the insurance environment, because you'll be assisting people in, for various claims and for various policies and so on. So therefore, you will be in fact assisting people in doing sins and in doing guna and doing something which is haram. And in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ, that do not assist people in something which is sinful and wal udwan, and something where there is zulm, transgression, and where there is oppression. So you shouldn't assist people in doing those kind of things. So keeping that particular principle in mind, like working in a bank, similarly working in the insurance side or in the insurance company, working as, for example, claiming or selling various policies on behalf of a particular insurance company or companies, then that would not be allowed and that would not be permissible. The third type of job we're going to look at is, like, for example, working in a store or in an environment where alcohol is being served or something which is haram that is being served. Now, obviously, the ruling is very straightforward that working in an environment like a restaurant or a store where alcohol is being served, and that is something which is haram and something which is impermissible in Islam. And it's quite clearly mentioned in the hadith of Sunan al-Tirmidhi, narrated by Sayyidina Anas bin Malik bin Anhu, that the Prophet of Allah ﷺ has cursed 10 people in connection with alcohol. That the curse of the Prophet of Allah ﷺ is on 10 people who are connected or who are linked with alcohol. The first one is the wine presser, i.e. the person who squeezes or who presses the grapes and so on to make the wine. He also is cursed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Number two, the one for who it is pressed. So the person who may have given the order that, make me some wine and so on. So because the wine is pressed for him, the grapes are pressed for him, then he also falls into the la'na and the curse from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number three, the one who drinks it. Number four, the one who carries it. Number five, the one for whom it is carried. So the one for whom it is carried. Number six, the one who serves it. Number seven, the one who sells it. Number eight, the one who benefits from the price paid for it. Number nine, the one who buys it. And number 10, and the one for whom it is bought. So these 10 people are all cursed by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because they are all linked in the making of wine, in the making of alcohol, and also in the trading and in the business of alcohol. And there's other hadiths as well, but the crux of the other hadiths basically give us one point, and that is that the same way it is haram to drink alcohol, it is also haram and lawful to sell alcohol. And this rule also applies for like meat which is haram, unlawful meat, or like, for example, selling pork or something like that, because these things like pork and unlawful meat, haram meat, because it is unlawful for Muslims to consume. Similarly, to sell these kind of things, it is also impermissible and unlawful for Muslims to do that. So keeping all these things in mind, we can clearly deduce and determine that working in such environments like restaurants or places where alcohol is being served, then it's not permissible for Muslims to work there. And to tell you, with regards to this particular masla, the restaurant workers, they tend to get the stick. But obviously this also applies for, working like Asda and Tesco's where alcohol is being served. If I'm not mistaken, I think in Asda they also serve alcohol as well. So obviously, serving, whatever you are, off license, not restricted to just takeaways or restaurants, whatever where alcohol is being served, whether it's off license, whether it's as a news agent, whether it's basically in Asda or Tesco, it doesn't matter. Where alcohol is being served, where basically you are lifting alcohol and putting it onto the shelves, or if you are working in a checkpoint and then you are sliding the alcohol bottle across the that scanning machine, then all of you come under the wrath of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So therefore, it's very important that we should try and refrain from working from those places. If a person is working in those places, then the nasiha should be given to him that look for an alternative job. And for the time being, the money which you earn, because obviously in Asda, alcohol probably will be, according to their total sales in a week or in a month, however it works, because obviously they sell other foods as well. So obviously alcohol is going to be a very less percentage than the other foods. So therefore, what we'll advise that particular brother is look for an alternative job. But if you can't find one, then the wages which you are receiving, then give a certain amount of it to charity without the intention of sawab. The next masla which I'm going to look at before we conclude this particular section is whether it is permissible for Muslims to work in the law field, like to work in the legal profession or to be lawyers or solicitors and so on. So whether it is permissible for Muslims to do that particular job. Now, Mufti Taqi Uthmani in his contemporary fatwa has mentioned that there are three conditions which need to be found in order for a person to take a job in the legal profession, in order for a person to work as a lawyer, to work as a solicitor, or for him to be a barrister or an advocate and so on. Three conditions need to be found. The first condition is that number one is that his job should be done for a just cause. That he's doing it for insaf, with the intention of adl in his mind, with the intention of insaf in his mind, he should be doing that particular job. Now, keeping this particular principle in mind, just say, for example, if a person, he's a solicitor or he's a lawyer, and he gets a case where it seems as though, like, he is certain that this person is guilty of that particular crime, that he knows that he killed that particular person, or he knows that the evidences, say, for example, shows or points that this person is guilty of that crime. Then in that situation, for that particular Muslim lawyer or for that particular Muslim solicitor or whatever, he will not be allowed to take that particular case. So obviously, when you know that someone is guilty, or when it's far more likely that he is guilty of that particular crime, then obviously he hired you to do what? He hired you to do, like, basically lie and cheat to get a not guilty verdict for him. But when you know that he is guilty, or for example, he kind of admits it to yourself, he admits to himself that he actually committed that crime, then in that situation, it would not be allowed for you to take that particular case, because obviously you're not doing adl there, you're not doing insaf there, but instead you will be doing zulm and you'll be oppressing the victim. So in that first condition is that the job or the work should be done for a just cause. The second condition which Mufti Taqi Usmani writes is that the case shouldn't be something where the claimant is getting a right which he does not deserve, or he is getting a haqq which he is not meant to get. Like, for example, just say a claimant, he comes to your office and he says that, this strip of land is mine. And the defendant is saying that, no, this strip of land is mine. And when you look at the case, it seems as though that the defendant, he is on haqq. The defendant, the victim, he is on haqq, he is on the truth, and that strip of land is his. Now, for you to take that case will not be allowed, because what you will be doing is that, again, like the first condition, you will be lying, you will be deceiving, and then you will give that. And just say, for example, if you manage to win, then you will be, in fact, have become a cause for that person receiving something which he was not meant to receive, or which was not his haqq and which was not his right to receive. So therefore, the second condition is that the cases which you take shouldn't be something which that person is not meant to take. Okay, if that piece of land is not his, then he's not meant to take that. So you shouldn't take up such a case where you'll be lying and deceiving, and then you will get a decision where the judge will say that, okay, this particular strip of land is his, because obviously you know for sure that that's not his land, so you will be giving a right of which is not deserved or which is not supposed to get. And the third condition which Mufti Taqi has written is that the means used in helping a client must not be prohibited in the Sharia. Like, the means that, for example, means here means that the way you are going to achieve your goal or your aim, then you shouldn't use something which is haram and achieve that particular decision or that particular claim. Meaning that, just say, for example, somebody's come and he's asked you to, can you defend me and so on. So you defend him, and you defend him as normally, like according to the rules, play by the rules and so on. Don't do any cheating, don't do any trickery, don't do any lying, don't do any kind of forge some kind of documents and so on. Nothing like that. Do it according to the rules set out by the Sharia. And obviously, these are also the rules of the English legal system as well, that, you're not allowed to deceive, you're not allowed to forge any documents and so on. So similarly here as well, this is also a rule of Islam, that you're not allowed to cheat someone, you're not allowed to lie and so on. So the third condition is that the means used in helping a client should not be something which is haram and prohibited in Islam. So these are the three conditions which need to be found for a person working in the legal profession, whether he's a lawyer, whether he's a solicitor, and if a person is confident that he could fulfill these kind of condition or these three conditions, then obviously it'll be permissible for him to do such a job. Okay. Obviously, if he thinks that he won't be able to do that, then obviously he could get the degree, he could get the law degree, and then he could use it for some of the kind of things in where he will be benefiting Islam. So these are three kind of jobs which are mentioned. Obviously, just to conclude this particular topic, just remember the main condition is that you have to remember that is that the nature of the job you're doing, that has to be lawful, and number two is that the wages and the salary you're receiving, that has to be lawful. So if these two conditions are found, then the job which you are doing, then it will be permissible. Now let's look ahead to the next part of the verse of Surah Al-Baqarah. So just to clarify, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhan nas, the O people, u'budu rabbakum, that worship your Lord. So we looked at the word worship. Now what is meant by the word rabbakum? Now rabbakum in Arabic literally means nurturing. Rabba yurabbi, and from there you get the word tarbiyah. And tarbiyah, like you probably heard the name, youth tarbiyah conference and so on. So tarbiyah basically means nurturing and rectifying a person. So what this particular verse is saying, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is your nurturer. So u'budu rabbakum, so therefore worship your nurturer. And how has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala nurtured us? Then if we just look at the way what we were to what we are now, then we can deduce and determine that very easily that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our nurturer. That we were a drop of semen before, but then after that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made that semen, He turned that into a clot of blood. And then after that clot of blood, it turned into some flesh. And after the flesh, it turned into a child, a baby, a child, then a teenager, and now to what we are, like healthy young adults and so on. So when we look at our life, we can see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our nurturer, that He nurtured us, He nourished us from what we were to what we are now. So therefore the verse is saying, u'budu rabbakum, that worship your nurturer. U'budu rabbakum, worship your nurturer. Alladhi khalaqakum. And the next phrase goes on to say that this Rabb or this nurturer, He is the one, Alladhi khalaqakum, who created you. Alladhi khalaqakum, who created you. Now, on verse number 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just mentioning some kind of characteristics and some qualities and some kind of blessings and bounties of this particular being, i.e. of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what's the first quality, what's the first attribute? Alladhi khalaqakum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the being who created you. Wo jo tumko paida kiya. And at the same time, He goes on to say, وَالَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ, that He also created those before you. That not only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you, i.e. the person who's reciting the Holy Quran, but the people around you, your mothers, your fathers, your brothers, sisters and so on, your friends, relatives, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also created them. Similarly, your ancestors, your forefathers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created them. So, Rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum, that the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy of worship is because number one, He created you, and at the same time, وَالَّذِينَ مِن قَبْلِكُمْ, He has also created those before you. لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, that's so that you can, or so that you may become God-fearing. The next verse, verse number 22 of Surah Al-Baqarah, because these were two qualities which we mentioned, and basically from these two qualities, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just mentioning some bounties and some ni'mah to the individual himself. That the individual, the person who is reciting the Quran, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you, and He also created your relatives, your friends, your ancestors and so on. So keep that in mind. Why? Because He is the most worthy of worship, because He has created you and He has created those before you. And then from verse number 22, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to mention some other blessings, but it's not linked with the individual, but it's actually linked with the environment he is living in. It's linked with the country or the place where that individual is living. And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ فِرَاشًا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that being who made the earth a bed for you. الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ, the word arda means earth, and the word firashan means bed. Now the question here is that why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word firash, bed, to describe this earth. Now, again, this is like the beauty of the Holy Quran. It's like a subtle indication here that the same way the bed which you sleep in, or the mattress and so on, is nice and soft. It's not too hard, but it's not at the same time too soft, because if it was too soft, then your back goes all down, and then obviously it may give you back problem later on. And it's not too hard as well, but it's just in between. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is indicating that this earth which we are living in, which we walk on, it's like that. That it's not too hard for you to walk on, and at the same time it's not too soft for you to, meaning that, so that it becomes difficult for you to walk on. Just like, for example, like quicksand, so obviously it's difficult for you to walk there. So if it was too soft, just say for example, if the earth was all spongy and so on, then it would be difficult for you to walk properly, to walk. Now what will happen is that every time you take a step, then your feet will go right down inside the earth, and it's going to be difficult for you to walk. And at the same time, that if the earth was too hard, like if it was too hilly, too rocky and so on, then again that you will find it difficult, your feet will be paining, and there will be a lot of pain there on your feet whilst you're walking. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created the earth in such a way that it isn't too hard, but it isn't too soft, just in between, just perfect for us, so that we can walk many, many miles without it finding difficult. Again, this is a ni'mah, this is a blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't realize if we just like walk on the road just like normally, or just walk on the sand just as normal. But when you look at it, this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He created in such a way where it is easy for us to walk. This is a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, He could have just made the earth spongy, or He could have made it all rocky. Then again we would have had to live here, and we would have had to go through the difficulty and so on. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He showed a great, He sent a great blessing and a ni'mah, that He created the world in such a way that it is just about perfect for us to walk on the roads and walk on the streets. So الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ فِرَاشًا. So the first ni'mah, which is linked with the environment, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made the earth a bed for you. وَالسَّمَاءَ بِنَاءً. And at the same time, He has made the sky a roof for us. Bina'an here means a roof. That the sky which is above us, it's like a roof. Now here the reason why the word bina'an, i.e. roof, was used is to show the beauty of the sky. A building or a roof which doesn't have a ceiling doesn't look nice. Okay, if you just have like a building or a roof, or just like a four walls, and there's no ceiling on top, then it doesn't look nice. Okay, obviously the rain will come and so on. But when you have a ceiling, when you have some nice chandeliers and so on, then obviously the ceiling looks nice. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that the sky which is above us, that is like a ceiling. And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has beautified the sky is by the stars. That when we look at the sky during the night, we see many millions of stars and so on, and the shine and the twinkle of the stars. That's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has beautified, and that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has adorned the sky. By having millions of stars there, and the shine of the stars falling onto the earth, and the kind of twinkle which we see, that's how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has beautified the skies. So that's why the word bina'an was used, was-sama'a bina'a, to describe that this again is also a ni'mah and a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, in olden days, when people would travel at night time, obviously they didn't have street lamps or anything like that during those days. So they would use the light from the sky for their route, that this way to this particular country, or this way to that particular direction and so on. So they would use the light and the glow from the stars. So again, that is also a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the stars so that we can use during the night time to see our way, to see which direction which we are going. وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً. And another ni'mah, or another blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, another bounty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He has sent from the sky water. Ma'an. Ma'an means water, and as-sama means the sky. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the heavens, from the sky, He has sent water. Again, that is another blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, another ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because with this water, we survive on earth. Our body is full of water, and our water For example, in our body, if it dries up, then obviously we will die. Similarly, if we don't drink plenty of water, or if we don't drink water, then we can easily die of thirst. So water is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We use the water to live and to survive on this earth and in this world. And obviously with water, we use it for other things as well. We use the water to clean ourselves, to purify ourselves. We use water to do wuzu. We use water to have a bath. We do other things as well. We use water to like clean our clothes and our clothing and so on. So when you look at it, if just say for example, if there wasn't any water in this world, then how would we say for example have a bath, or how would we like for example do wuzu? How would we like say for example like wash our clothes and so on? How would we able to like live in this earth or in this world without water? So when we analyze it, وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the heavens, from the skies, He has sent water. So water is a ni'mah and is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ السَّمَرَاتِ رِزْقًا لَكُمْ. And from or with this particular water, He has extracted fruit, رِزْقًا لَكُمْ, which is a source of provision for you. Now with this water, and when the water, when it falls on certain lands and certain places, then the crops grow, the onions grow, the potatoes grow, the fruits and the vegetables, they grow. Again, that is another blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, again, He could have just sent water, but it's with His hukum, with His order, that when that particular water touches or drops on a particular seed, then from there the potatoes grow, the onions grow and so on. That again is another blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that with that same water, not only can we clean ourselves and purify ourselves, not only can we quench our thirst, but with that same water, different types of fruits and vegetable grows, and these vegetables and these fruits which we use to eat, which we use to keep ourselves healthy and sane. So again, that again is another blessing and another ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that from this particular water, فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ رِزْقًا لَكُمْ, He has extracted fruit which is a source of provision for us. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to finish this particular verse number 21 by saying, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ. That do not set up andad, partners or parallels with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously, there's few things which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned. And the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned these things, so that the person who's reading the Quran or the person who's listening to the Quran, he can deduce and determine that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Rabb, the nurturer, He is worthy of worship. No other idol, no other person who claims to be a God, he is not worthy of worship, but only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is worthy of worship. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created us. He created our ancestors, He created the many hundreds, billions of people who have set foot on this earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created every single one of them. Then He goes on to talk about the blessings which are in our environment where we live. That without these blessings, then we would not exist, we would not be able to survive in this world. They are such, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made the zameen, has made the earth soft. He has made the sky, He has used the sky as a roof, meaning that He has adorned it, He has beautified it. On top of that, وَأَنزَلَ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مَاءً, and then from the heavens there is water. فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ رِزْقًا لَكُمْ, and from the and with the water various types of fruits and vegetables are extracted. So all these things are indicating that only and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is worthy of worship. So therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He concludes this verse by saying that فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا, that do not make parallels or do not make partners with me. That do not say that this particular idol, he is in charge of the rain, or this particular idol, he is in charge of the food, or this particular idol, he's the one who who gives the light and the sun and so on and so forth. But the belief is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does everything. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one who gives the rain. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who gives the provision. So therefore, فَلَا تَجْعَلُوا لِلَّهِ أَنْدَادًا, do not set parallels or do not set up any partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As I mentioned before, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wahid, He is one, He is not in need of any partners. وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, when you know. Ishan mein ke tum jante ho means that you know, like by reading these verses and by reading the portion of the Holy Quran, that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be the creator. So only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Khaliq, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be worthy of worship. So because of this reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that you know all this, but because the disbelievers, because the kuffar, because of their ancestors, the way they were brought up, and that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam claimed to be a Rasul and a Prophet, and he claimed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. For them, this seemed something new and something strange to them. So they didn't want to let go of their forefathers' teaching and their forefathers' religion. So they knew this. They knew that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator, He's worthy of worship. But because of their forefathers' religion, they didn't want to give up this. And even the hypocrites as well, they knew all this, but because of worldly motives, because of financial motives, they didn't want to give up their two-facedness. They didn't want to give up their lying and their cheating. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminding us that these people, the disbelievers, the hypocrites, they know this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is creator and He's the Khaliq. So therefore it is important that we let go of all these vain things. We let go of our, trickery. We let go of our cheating and so on. And it's all going back to the word "U'budu rabbakum," that worship your Lord. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Anybody have any questions?
What if you work in a bank in a head office and your job role is to deal with, not with interest, but foreign tax exchanges? So when a business is doing a transaction with another company in another country, and your job is to work out the tax exchanges and stuff like that, would that be allowed?
What kind of tax is it?
Stuff like corporation tax and also conversion charges. From euros to dollars, the charges involved, things like that.
It will be permissible as long as the tax is not something where it's like haram tax, unlawful tax. Obviously, there's certain types of tax, and one is like where the government, they take the tax from you for the benefit of the environment or for the benefit of the the city you're living in. Like for example, for the for the environment, so for the roads and so on. So obviously, those kind of tax are permissible. But then there are other types of tax where the government are taking without any kind of reason, and they're just using it for their pocket. So if it's those kind of tax, then obviously if you are calculating those kind of things, then obviously that would not be allowed, because obviously that in itself, you're assisting people in doing zulm and oppressing, so that would not be allowed. But if it's not that kind of tax, then it would be allowed. And similarly, conversion rates, that's okay as well.
You mentioned earlier about working in a supermarket. What if you work in a supermarket, but in like the bakery section or something, or in the stock room, where you don't
Touching the alcohol. Yeah, that would be okay.
That would be okay.
Yeah.
You said about that you shouldn't be taking any wrong news to if you're a solicitor or judge. So what if the other person, other side, they are using wrong means to justify that, and you know that this guy is innocent, then and if he's having advantage on taking the wrong means and bringing false witnesses and all. So in this case, what are you gonna do? Shouldn't you just should you go with your? No,
you shouldn't go. If it's gonna mean that you have to do some kind of like cheating and something trickery and so on, you shouldn't go. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم السلام منك السلام تبارك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار صلى الله تعالى على خير خلق محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.